The cold metallic walls of the alien research facility hummed softly, casting a sterile glow over the room. Dr. Alex Daniels, a human researcher, stared at the screen before him, his fingers frozen over the keyboard. The data scrolling past his eyes was fascinating, yet terrifying in its implications. The alien princess stood across from him, her gaze sharp and filled with an unsettling mixture of curiosity and disbelief. "You're lying," she said, her voice smooth and commanding, with a subtle edge that cut through the sterile silence. "Humans can't breed year-round. It's biologically impossible." Alex's heart skipped a beat, his mind racing. He had known this moment would come, but he hadn't prepared himself for the intensity of the alien princess's accusation. This wasn't just a scientific inquiry, it felt personal, almost like a challenge to everything he believed about his own species. "I assure you, Princess Ariana," Alex replied, forcing his voice to remain steady, "it is entirely possible. Humans are capable of reproduction year-round, under the right conditions. The question is whether you believe me, or if you have something else in mind." He leaned forward, trying to match her unblinking stare. The alien princess, her delicate, ethereal features framed by long strands of silvery hair, narrowed her violet eyes. Her skin shimmered slightly under the artificial lights, the soft luminescence a stark contrast to Alex's human form. Despite the calm in her voice, her presence exuded an authority that made even the most seasoned diplomats uneasy. She took a step forward, the air around her seeming to shimmer with an invisible energy. "Prove it," she commanded. Alex's mind buzzed with uncertainty. He had expected questions, doubts, perhaps even skepticism. But this demand, this challenge, was something else entirely. His thoughts scrambled to find a way to navigate the conversation, but the princess had already placed him in a corner. There was no turning back now. "Prove it?" Alex repeated, his voice quieter now. "How would you like me to do that?" Princess Ariana smiled, but it wasn't a smile that comforted him. "You will undergo the necessary testing, of course," she said, gesturing toward the sterile examination table behind her. "You will provide the data. Blood samples, genetic tests, hormonal analysis. Every piece of evidence that confirms your claim. If you succeed, you will have earned the right to call humanity resilient." Alex hesitated. The princess wasn't just doubting his words, she was challenging the very core of human biology. But there was something more sinister beneath her words, something he couldn't quite put his finger on. He looked over at the alien instruments on the nearby table, tools that were unlike anything he had seen before. There were devices that seemed to hum with energy, their surfaces sleek and metallic. He was in an alien facility, surrounded by beings far more advanced than humanity had ever dreamed of. And yet, here was a being, in all her otherworldly beauty, asking him to prove the very nature of his existence. "I'll need the proper equipment," Alex said finally, though his voice held a note of uncertainty. "And you'll need to give me access to your species' medical records. I can't conduct any experiments without context." Ariana's gaze softened for a brief moment, and Alex almost mistook it for kindness. But the moment passed too quickly. "The data you require is available," she said. "However, it is unlikely that your understanding of our biology will be enough to interpret it." Alex didn't answer immediately. His mind was already moving, calculating the next steps. The alien species was undeniably advanced, but he had been trained for moments like these. He had to play his cards carefully. This wasn't just about proving humanity's abilities, it was about navigating a minefield of alien politics, trust, and survival. "Fine," Alex finally said, rising from his chair. "I'll do what you ask. But I will need time to run these tests. You can't expect miracles in a day." Ariana's eyes flickered for the briefest moment, as if she were silently assessing his every word, his every movement. "You have 3 days," she said coldly. "Any longer and I will assume you are hiding the truth from me. Do not test my patience, human." With that, she turned, her robes trailing behind her as she exited the room, leaving Alex alone with his thoughts. The door slid shut with a soft hiss, and he was left in the eerie quiet of the research facility, his mind racing. The pressure mounts. As the door closed behind her, Alex couldn't help but feel the weight of the princess's words pressing down on him. He stood there for a long moment, his gaze fixed on the glowing data readouts in front of him. He had been in situations before where the stakes were high, but this was different. He wasn't just proving something for scientific curiosity, he was proving humanity's worth. The princess's challenge was a public statement, a gauntlet thrown at his feet. If he failed, humanity would be deemed weak, inferior. But if he succeeded, what then? Alex had no illusions. The princess might acknowledge humanity's resilience, but that would only be the beginning of a much larger game. He knew that behind the scientific inquiry lay political maneuvering, and it wasn't just about biology, it was about power. The aliens had been watching humanity for centuries, studying their every move. To them, humans were still an enigma, a species whose potential was both feared and underestimated. But Alex was determined to prove them wrong. He didn't have much time, and the pressure was mounting. He gathered his things and began to prepare for the tests. He needed samples, human blood, genetic material, and other biological indicators that would demonstrate the truth of humanity's reproductive capabilities. But the task ahead wasn't as simple as it sounded. There were limitations to what even alien technology could reveal about human biology. He would need to think creatively if he was going to get the princess to believe him. A voice in the dark. Hours passed as Alex worked in silence. The room was eerily quiet, save for the soft whirring of the alien equipment around him. He wasn't entirely alone, however. Occasionally, he would glance at the monitor, and strange symbols would flash briefly on the screen, as if someone, or something, was observing his progress. "Are you ready?" a voice suddenly echoed in the room. Alex turned quickly, his heart racing, but no one was there. The voice had come from nowhere, as though it had materialized out of the air itself. He hesitated. Was it a glitch in the system? Some strange alien communication? Or had the princess somehow returned to monitor him? He didn't know, but one thing was certain, he couldn't afford distractions. The princess's return. The next morning, just as Alex was beginning the final stages of his tests, Princess Ariana returned. She appeared in the doorway, her figure framed by the stark, cold light of the facility's entrance. Her expression was unreadable, but there was an air of expectation about her. "You have 1 day left," she said simply. "I expect results, Dr. Daniels." Alex nodded, swallowing the anxiety that threatened to choke him. "I'll have the results. But as I've said, this is not an easy task. I am not just collecting blood samples, Princess. I am testing human biology against your expectations. You may not like what you find." Ariana tilted her head slightly, her eyes narrowing with an unreadable intensity. "I'm not concerned with what I like, human. I'm concerned with what is true." Her words sent a chill down Alex's spine. Something about the way she spoke unsettled him, like she knew more than she was letting on. But there was no time to dwell on it. He had a challenge to meet, and failing wasn't an option. As Ariana left the room once again, Alex couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. He had made his decision. He would not back down. He would prove humanity's strength, no matter what it took. The tension in the room was palpable as Princess Ariana and her advisors stood silently, their alien eyes fixed on Dr. Alex Daniels. The data tablet in his hands felt like it weighed a ton, and his heart raced in his chest. He had spent the entire night running tests, analyzing human biology in ways he had never imagined, hoping to meet the expectations of the alien princess. But now, as the moment of truth arrived, Alex couldn't shake the feeling that the true challenge was only just beginning. Princess Ariana stepped forward, her movements graceful yet purposeful. The room seemed to grow colder, the air thick with unspoken power. Her violet eyes scanned him, assessing, measuring, as though she could read his very thoughts. "You have completed your tests." "Human," she said, her voice smooth but carrying an undeniable weight of authority. "I will give you the chance to prove yourself. But I warn you, the stakes are higher than you think." Alex swallowed hard, his throat dry. He wanted to speak, but words escaped him. What was she implying? Was she testing his loyalty? Or was there more at play here than he had realized? He handed her the data tablet, feeling the eyes of the alien advisors on him as though they were dissecting him with every glance. Ariana took it from him with an almost imperceptible tilt of her head, as if measuring his every move. For a moment, she remained silent, her focus entirely on the screen before her. Her fingers danced across the device, manipulating the data with ease, her movements fluid and precise. The room held its breath as the minutes ticked by. Alex stood frozen, unable to predict what would come next. He had prepared for the worst, an argument, a challenge, perhaps even accusations of fraud, but what if they didn't just want proof? What if they wanted something else entirely? Finally, Princess Ariana spoke, her voice cutting through the tension like a blade. "You've done the tests," she said slowly, her gaze never leaving the screen. "But you still haven't answered the most important question." Alex's pulse quickened. "What question is that?" Her violet eyes flicked up to meet his, sharp and unyielding. "Why should I believe you? Why should I believe that humanity is as resilient as you claim?" Alex blinked, momentarily stunned. I just showed you the data," he stammered. "The tests prove that humans can breed year-round, that." She raised a hand to silence him, and the room fell into an eerie stillness. "I didn't ask for your data, Dr. Daniels. I asked for your answer. Your species is fragile. You think you have proven something, but all you have shown me is that humans are capable of adapting under certain conditions. You are not invincible, and you will never be as resilient as you think." Her words struck him like a physical blow. It wasn't the scientific challenge that rattled him, it was the cold dismissal, the way she reduced his species to a mere experiment in the grander scheme of things. "But we are resilient," Alex argued, his voice firmer now. "We've survived countless challenges. Disease, war, famine, humanity has endured time and time again. We may not be perfect, but our strength lies in our ability to keep going. No matter what." Princess Ariana studied him for a long moment, her expression unreadable. Then, she did something unexpected. She smiled. It wasn't a smile of amusement, but something more curious, more intrigued. "You speak of resilience, Dr. Daniels," she said. "But resilience alone is not enough. There is something you don't understand about us. About my people." Alex was confused. "What do you mean?" Ariana leaned closer, her gaze intense. "You've only scratched the surface. Your tests may have proven that humanity can breed year-round, but you've failed to understand the true nature of survival. You're too focused on biology, on data. But survival isn't just about reproduction. It's about adaptability. It's about understanding your environment, knowing how to manipulate it to your advantage." She paused, letting her words sink in. Alex had no response. He was beginning to understand that this wasn't just about proving a scientific theory, it was about something far more complex. The princess wasn't interested in the biology of humans. She wanted to see if they could rise to the occasion, if they could prove that they were worthy of survival in a galaxy full of unknowns. "You are no different from the other species we've encountered," Ariana continued. "You adapt, you evolve, but you are still fragile. You rely on your biology, but you don't understand your place in the universe. That is where you fail." Alex felt a flicker of frustration. How could she dismiss everything humanity had accomplished? How could she ignore the wars they'd fought, the struggles they had overcome, the countless obstacles they had faced and conquered. "But we do understand our place," Alex exclaimed, his voice rising. "We've made it this far despite everything. We've explored the stars. We've learned to adapt, to overcome. And we won't stop. No matter what you say, no matter how many tests you throw at us, we'll find a way. Because that's who we are." The room went silent again, the weight of his words hanging in the air. For a moment, Alex thought Ariana might lash out, might challenge him even further. But instead, she remained still, her eyes watching him with a new sense of calculation. "You are not like the others," she said softly. "I see now that there is more to you than I initially thought." Alex felt a surge of hope, but it was fleeting. He knew that this was far from over. The princess might have acknowledged something in him, but that didn't mean she was willing to let him off easy. There was still a bigger game at play. "Tell me, Dr. Daniels," Ariana said after a long pause, "do you understand what it means to be truly resilient?" Before Alex could respond, she turned to her advisors. "Prepare for the next phase," she commanded. One of the advisors stepped forward, a tall, imposing figure with dark blue skin and an air of authority. "Yes, Princess," he replied. Ariana didn't look back at Alex. "You've proven one thing, Dr. Daniels," she said, her voice cool and distant once again. "Humans have a remarkable ability to survive. But that is not enough. The true test is yet to come. You will need more than your biology to prove your worth." Alex stood there, stunned. What was she talking about? Was the survival of humanity just a preliminary test? What was the real challenge? Before he could ask, the door slid open, and the advisors ushered him out of the room. He had no choice but to follow, his mind swirling with questions. The test of adaptation. The hallways of the alien facility were eerily quiet as Alex walked behind the advisors. He had no idea where they were taking him, but something told him this wasn't going to be another simple test of human biology. This was something far more complicated. The further they walked, the more isolated the facility seemed. There were no other beings in sight, no signs of life except for the occasional soft hum of machinery. It felt as if they were heading deeper into the heart of the alien complex, away from the research labs and into unknown territory. Finally, they arrived at a large, cylindrical chamber. The walls were covered in strange, glowing symbols, and the air smelled faintly of ozone. In the center of the room was a massive, translucent sphere. Inside the sphere, Alex could see shifting, swirling colors, almost like a storm contained within a bubble. "What is this?" Alex asked, his voice barely above a whisper. One of the advisors stepped forward. "This is the next phase of your test," he said. "The test of adaptation. You will be placed inside the sphere, where you will be tested in ways you cannot predict. You will have to adapt, to survive. If you succeed, you will have proven that humanity has what it takes to survive in the galaxy." Alex felt a chill run down his spine. This was it, the real test. This wasn't about biology anymore. This was about adaptability, about survival in the truest sense. He didn't know what awaited him inside that sphere, but he knew one thing for sure: there was no turning back now. The moment Alex stepped into the sphere, the door slid shut behind him with a soft hum, locking him in. The room, or rather, the sphere, was nothing like he had expected. The swirling lights that had pulsed outside now engulfed him in a kaleidoscope of colors, each hue shifting and changing in ways that defied logic. The air inside was thick, yet strangely breathable, as though it was designed specifically for him to survive. But it wasn't just the atmosphere that sent a shiver down his spine. It was the sensation that he wasn't alone. Something, or someone, was watching him from the shadows. He could feel it. The floor beneath his feet was soft, like thick, rubbery moss. Every step he took caused it to ripple slightly, as though the very ground was alive. The walls of the sphere were translucent, offering a view of the swirling vortex outside, but it didn't seem like he was standing in a confined space. It felt more like he was floating in an otherworldly dimension, disconnected from reality. For a moment, Alex simply stood there, trying to gather his thoughts. He didn't know what the princess had meant by the test of adaptation, but one thing was clear: he had to survive. He had to prove humanity's resilience, not just in biology, but in a broader, more intangible sense. If he failed, he wasn't sure what would happen. But he knew it would be catastrophic. Suddenly, the colors around him began to shift faster. The lights flickered and changed, as if the environment itself was reacting to his presence. He blinked, trying to make sense of what was happening, but then, without warning, the ground beneath him shifted violently. The floor rippled like water, and Alex stumbled, barely managing to catch himself before he fell. Then came the voices. They weren't words, exactly. More like deep, resonating tones that vibrated in his chest. They seemed to be coming from all directions at once, filling the space with an eerie hum. His instincts told him to be alert, to stay on his feet, but the strange vibrations kept messing with his balance. A booming voice echoed through the sphere, low and almost imperceptible. "Do you feel it?" Alex's heart skipped a beat. He wasn't sure if the voice was real or if it was just the sphere playing tricks on him. But he wasn't going to wait to find out. He needed answers, and he needed them fast. "Who's there?" he called out, his voice strained but steady. There was no response, just the pulsating hum that seemed to grow louder with each passing second. The swirling lights intensified, turning from soft blues and greens to bright reds and purples. The temperature inside the sphere began to fluctuate wildly, from freezing cold to scorching heat in a matter of seconds. Sweat poured down Alex's face as his body struggled to maintain balance in the ever-changing environment. It was clear, this wasn't just a test of his physical endurance. This was a test of his mind, of his ability to think clearly under pressure. He took a deep breath and forced himself to focus. The first thing he had to do was adapt. But how? What exactly was he supposed to do in this ever-shifting, unpredictable environment? He looked around, scanning the sphere for any clues, anything that might help him make sense of what was happening. There was nothing, no guide, no instructions, no way to tell what was real or what was part of the test. And then, just as suddenly as it had started, the temperature returned to normal. The light stabilized, and the ground beneath him became firm once more. He exhaled, relieved, but it didn't last long. The next challenge appeared almost instantly. A loud, rumbling sound filled the air, and the walls of the sphere seemed to warp, bending inward like the skin of an enormous creature. From the center of the room, a massive shadow began to take form. Alex's eyes widened in disbelief as the shape grew clearer. It was a creature, large, menacing, and terrifying. Its body was covered in dark, armored scales, and its eyes glowed with a menacing red light. It had 4 legs, each ending in claws sharp enough to tear through metal, and a long tail that whipped behind it like a weapon. The creature let out a guttural growl, its massive mouth opening to reveal rows of jagged teeth. Alex took a step back, instinctively raising his arms in a futile attempt to protect himself. The creature's glowing eyes locked onto him, and for a moment, he thought he could hear the sound of its heartbeat, steady and powerful. It lunged forward, fast as lightning. The battle for survival. Alex barely had time to react. The creature's clawed paw shot out toward him, aiming to strike him down in an instant. He dodged to the side, heart pounding in his chest. His mind raced, trying to figure out what to do. He had no weapons, no tools, just his body and his wits. The creature roared, its jaws snapping shut just inches from his head. Alex scrambled backward, barely managing to stay on his feet as the beast took another swipe at him. Its claws tore through the air with a sickening sound as they missed him by a fraction of an inch. His breathing was ragged now. Sweat drenched his shirt, and his mind raced. He couldn't outrun this thing, it was faster, stronger, and far more dangerous than anything he'd ever encountered. But he wasn't going to give up. He had to think. He had to survive. Alex glanced around, searching for something, anything, that might give him an advantage. And then he saw it, a small crack in the wall. It was barely noticeable, but it was enough to catch his attention. The creature was circling him, clearly not letting him escape, but if he could make it to the crack, maybe, just maybe, he could find a way to outsmart it. He bolted toward the wall, running as fast as he could. The creature roared behind him, but it was too late. Alex dove for the crack, slipping through just as the beast lunged again, its claws narrowly missing him. For a brief moment, everything was silent. Alex lay flat on the ground, his body pressed against the cold surface of the wall. His heart was still racing, but he allowed himself a moment to catch his breath. He had made it through the first challenge, but this was only the beginning. As he lay there, trying to steady his pulse, the ground beneath him began to shift again. The walls of the sphere seemed to ripple like water, and the colors started to swirl faster than before. The rumbling sound returned, growing louder and louder until it became deafening. Alex looked up, fear gripping his chest. Another challenge was coming. The test of mind and body. This time, it wasn't a physical threat that came for him, but something far more insidious. The sphere began to distort once more, but this time, it wasn't just the environment that changed. The air grew thick and oppressive, and Alex's vision began to blur. He stumbled to his feet, his mind growing foggy. He could feel the pressure in his chest, the pounding in his head. His body felt heavy, like it was sinking into the ground. The rumbling voice returned, this time more insistent, more commanding. "Do you still think you can survive, human?" Alex staggered, trying to push through the fog in his mind. He could feel his thoughts slipping away from him, as though the very fabric of his consciousness was unraveling. The sphere was trying to break him, to tear him apart from the inside out. But he refused to let it. He had come too far, endured too much to give up now. With every ounce of strength he could muster, Alex focused. He pushed through the fog, clinging to the knowledge that he was human, that he had the power to adapt, to fight, and to survive. The pressure on his chest eased, and the fog in his mind lifted. His vision cleared, and he stood tall once again. The environment shifted one last time, the walls of the sphere returning to their original state, calm and still. "You have passed the first trial," the voice intoned, its tone far less menacing now. "But this is only the beginning, human. You must adapt to more than just the environment. You must adapt to the unknown." And with those words, the ground beneath him trembled once again. Alex's heart pounded as he was engulfed by the darkness. The black void surrounded him, pressing in from all sides, until it felt like the very air was choking him. His lungs burned, and his body felt weightless. There was no ground beneath him, no sky above, just an endless expanse of nothingness. For a moment, Alex thought he might have been transported somewhere else, someplace deep in space or perhaps another dimension altogether. His mind raced with the possibilities, each one darker than the last. Had the princess intended for him to die here, in this alien trap? Or was this part of the trial, another test of his will to survive? He couldn't move. His limbs felt as if they were bound by invisible forces, holding him suspended in the inky blackness. A low hum reverberated through the air, a deep, unsettling tone that made the hairs on the back of his neck stand up. He tried to scream, but his voice came out as a faint whisper. "Survive, human," the voice echoed again. This time, it was different. It was softer, almost compassionate, but still filled with the same cold command. "Prove you can survive." The weight in his chest increased, like the pressure of 1,000 stars pressing down on him, crushing him. Every breath felt harder to take. He thought for sure his heart would give out under the strain. Yet, in the darkest moment, something stirred within him, a flicker of defiance, a reminder of everything he had fought for to get this far. Alex couldn't afford to give up. Not now. With all the strength he could muster, he focused on his breathing. In. Out. Slowly, deliberately, as if his very existence depended on it. His body began to move again, his limbs protesting, but responding. The darkness started to recede, slowly, and with each passing second, Alex's vision began to return. He saw light, dim and distant, but it was there. Something was ahead of him, something beyond this all-consuming void. Desperately, he pushed himself toward it. As he moved forward, he felt the weight on eye. His chest lift, like a barrier between him and the light had broken. His body tingled with energy, and the oppressive blackness seemed to lessen with every inch he took. But just when he thought he might escape, the hum intensified, and the light flickered. It was as if the sphere, whatever force controlled this place, was rejecting him. Alex's eyes widened as the light dimmed again, and he heard a soft whisper, like a distant voice, calling to him from the void. It was a voice that seemed too familiar to ignore, one he had heard before, but couldn't place. "Alex," it whispered. "It's not over. You haven't seen the truth yet." Confusion gripped him. The voice sounded human, but how could it be? There was no way anyone else could be trapped here with him. Yet, in that instant, Alex realized something profound: he wasn't alone. Not really. There was something else in the sphere with him, something hidden just beneath the surface. And then, the voice spoke again. "Survival is not enough. You must understand why you're here. The hidden truth." The void finally began to clear, and the light ahead grew brighter. As it did, Alex saw it, a figure, faint at first, but becoming clearer with each step. The figure was humanoid in shape, but it was not human. It had elongated limbs, and its skin shimmered with an iridescent glow. The creature was translucent, like a being formed from light itself, yet its features were distinct. The figure's eyes, bright, luminous pools, stared at Alex, piercing him with an intensity he couldn't explain. The figure moved toward him, its body shifting fluidly through the air as if gravity didn't apply. There was something ancient about it, as though it had existed for eons, watching over all things. "Who are you?" Alex gasped, his voice trembling. He felt the weight of his question, unsure if he even wanted the answer. The figure's lips moved, but no sound came out. Instead, Alex felt the answer in his mind, the words connecting with his very being. It wasn't language, but understanding, something far more profound. "I am a guardian," the figure's thoughts whispered to him. "I was sent to guide those who seek knowledge, to test their worth. To understand their essence. You, Alex Daniels, are one such seeker. You have been chosen." Alex's mind raced. Chosen for what? What did this creature mean? What did it want from him? "Why me?" he asked, still struggling to grasp the gravity of the situation. "Why am I here? What's this trial about?" The guardian paused, its glowing form flickering like a distant star. Then, its eyes met his again, and he felt an overwhelming sense of calm. It was as if everything about him, his fears, his questions, even his doubts, were being absorbed by the figure, who now seemed to understand him more deeply than any living being ever could. "The trial is not just for you, Alex. It is for all of humanity," the guardian's voice echoed in his mind. "You are here to learn what it truly means to be human. To understand the strength and vulnerability that lies within your kind." Alex felt his pulse quicken. This was more than just about survival. This was about something much larger, something tied to humanity's very nature. But he still didn't understand. "Why the test?" he demanded. "Why is it so difficult?" The figure's expression softened, and Alex felt a deep sadness emanate from it, as though the guardian carried the weight of countless millennia. "You see, Alex," the figure said, "humanity's strength is not in your numbers, nor your intelligence, nor your technology. It is in your capacity to adapt, to overcome, to fight. Your species has endured so much, and yet, you continue to survive. You are the true inheritors of the stars, the ones who will lead the universe into a new age. But you must first prove you can overcome the trials of existence. Alex's mind whirled with the implications. His thoughts were consumed with questions, but one in particular stood out. "And the aliens?" he asked, looking up at the glowing figure. "What do they want? Why did they put me through this?" The Guardian's expression became grave. "They fear you," the figure whispered. "They do not understand your strength, your resilience. The trials are meant to break you, to test if you are worthy of being more than just a fleeting species. They fear that you might surpass them, that you might one day rise above them. The princess, for all her power, does not see what you are capable of. But I have watched you. You are stronger than you realize." Alex felt a surge of hope at the Guardian's words. He had always known that humanity had something special, but hearing it from this ancient being made it feel more real than ever before. Still, there was one thing he needed to know. "How can I prove myself?" he asked, desperation creeping into his voice. "How do I show them we're worth it?" The Guardian's eyes glowed brighter, its form becoming more solid. "You have already begun," it said. "Every test, every challenge, you have faced with courage and determination. But there is one last trial, one final truth you must learn. The truth about the nature of the test." Before Alex could respond, the figure began to dissolve, its light flickering like a dying star. But as it faded, it left one final message in his mind. The test is not only for humanity. It is for the universe. And you, Alex Daniels, are the key. With that, the figure was gone, leaving Alex alone in the now still darkness. The final trial. The silence that followed was deafening. Alex stood motionless, his mind a whirlwind of questions and thoughts. He had always believed in humanity's potential, but now, it seemed that the entire universe had a stake in their survival. What did it all mean? What was the final trial he had to face? A sudden flash of light illuminated the sphere again, and Alex was forced to shield his eyes. When the light dimmed, he found himself standing before a massive, imposing doorway. It was made of a strange, metallic substance, the surface etched with intricate patterns and symbols that seemed to shift as he stared at them. The door slowly creaked open, revealing a blinding white light on the other side. Alex stepped forward, his pulse racing. This was it, the final trial. He didn't know what awaited him, but he had come too far to turn back now. He took a deep breath and crossed the threshold. Alex's heart raced as the ground beneath him quivered, the metallic sound reverberating through the walls of the chamber. The flickering light grew brighter and more erratic, like a pulse racing out of control. He swallowed hard, his throat dry, and his senses on high alert. Whatever was coming for him, it wasn't just a test, it was something far darker, far more dangerous. He scanned his surroundings, but there was nothing. The blinding light that had swallowed him upon entering now revealed little. The floor was solid, made of the same strange metallic material that lined the doorway, but there was no way to gauge how far the light stretched or what lay beyond its glowing edges. The low hum of the chamber intensified, vibrating deep within his chest. The air around him felt thick and suffocating, and Alex could almost taste the tension. Then, it happened. A figure emerged from the shadows, a tall, imposing silhouette moving toward him with terrifying speed. As the figure stepped into the light, Alex's breath caught in his throat. It was humanoid in form, but something about it was wrong. Its skin was a dull gray, almost metallic, reflecting the light like a piece of dark chrome. Its eyes, black as the void, shone with a malicious intensity that sent a chill down Alex's spine. He instinctively backed away, but there was nowhere to go. The figure advanced slowly, each step deliberate, each movement heavy with intent. As it grew closer, Alex's legs felt like lead, his body frozen in place as he stared at the entity that was closing in on him. "You are the one who dares to challenge the test," the figure's voice rang out, cold, emotionless, and devoid of any warmth. Its voice had no gender, no humanity, it was simply a presence. Alex's throat tightened as he struggled to speak, his mind spinning. "What are you? What do you want?" The creature's eyes locked with his, and for a moment, Alex felt as though he was being pierced by 1,000 knives. The creature's cold presence seemed to seep into his very soul, pushing him to the edge of something far beyond human understanding. "I am a trial," the figure responded, its voice resonating deep within Alex's chest. "A reminder of what lies at the heart of the universe. You seek to prove your worth, human. But you fail to understand. There is more at stake than your survival." Alex shook his head, still trying to process the words. "What do you mean? What more is there? You think this trial is about your species. But it is not. It never was." The figure's eyes glowed brighter, and Alex felt his knees weaken as the ground beneath him seemed to shift. The chamber seemed to stretch, the walls closing in, creating a sense of isolation that weighed heavily on him. "You were chosen," the figure continued, its voice growing louder, "but not because you are the best humanity has to offer. You were chosen because you are weak. Because you do not yet understand your true potential. You are not yet ready to face the truth." Alex's heart skipped a beat. He clenched his fists, fighting back the fear rising in his chest. "I'm not weak. I've survived everything you've thrown at me. My species has endured far worse than this." The figure chuckled, a low, unsettling sound that reverberated around the room. "You misunderstand. Your species survives, yes. But that does not mean you understand why. That is why you fail." Suddenly, the ground beneath him cracked open, and Alex barely had time to react before he was sucked into a vortex of darkness. The abyss of truth. He fell through the void, tumbling through endless space, twisting and turning with no sense of direction. The darkness surrounded him, suffocating him, pressing down on every side as if trying to crush him. He couldn't breathe. His lungs screamed for air, but there was none. It felt like hours had passed, though he knew it was only seconds. Time itself seemed to warp, bending and twisting in this alien world. He tried to scream, but his voice was swallowed by the void. And then, as suddenly as it had started, the fall stopped. He slammed into a hard surface, the impact jolting his body and knocking the wind out of him. Alex gasped for air, his chest heaving as he struggled to stand. He looked around. This was no longer the chamber he had been in before. He was now in an entirely different place. It was a vast, open space, endless and empty, stretching for what seemed like miles. The ground was cracked and barren, a wasteland of lifeless rocks and dust. The sky above him was an eerie shade of violet, swirling with unnatural clouds that seemed to move in slow, deliberate patterns. The air was thick, heavy, and unnatural, carrying a sense of foreboding that made Alex's skin crawl. And there, standing in the distance, was a figure, another one of those strange beings. Unlike the first, this one had no form, no face, only a swirling mass of light and shadow. It was as if the very essence of the universe had manifested into this thing, a being that was both everywhere and nowhere all at once. Alex's pulse quickened as he took a step forward, but his legs felt like jelly. The thing began to move toward him, its form shifting with each step. It wasn't walking, it was gliding, as if the ground beneath it couldn't contain its existence. As it drew closer, Alex felt a sharp pain in his chest, a pressure that forced him to his knees. He gasped, struggling to breathe, as the being hovered before him, its presence overwhelming. You are the human," the being intoned, its voice both deafening and impossibly soft at the same time. "The one who will decide everything." Alex's mind raced. Decide what? What is all of this? What is the truth? The entity's form shifted again, the light and shadow merging into one seamless whole. You are the key, Alex Daniels. The key to humanity's future. To the survival of your kind. The pressure in his chest intensified. He couldn't breathe. His vision blurred. You were chosen not because you are the strongest, the entity continued, but because you are the last hope. The trial was never about survival. It was about understanding. About realizing that your species has been on the verge of destruction all along. Alex's eyes widened. He gasped for air. What are you talking about? We're not doomed. The entity's swirling form seemed to pulse with energy, its voice growing louder and more insistent. You have always been doomed. It is your nature. You fight, you struggle, you survive. But you do not know why. You do not know how to use your true power. And that is why you must face the truth. A vision flashed before Alex's eyes, a vision of Earth, of his home, of humanity itself. He saw it all unraveling before him. War. Destruction. Struggle. Humanity had always fought to survive, but at what cost? His heart raced as the realization hit him. The trials were not just about him. They were about the future of his species. The entity's voice became softer, almost sorrowful. You are the last one who can break the cycle. The last one who can see the truth of your existence. The universe is vast, Alex. And humanity is not meant to be just another fleeting species. But first, you must understand what it truly means to be human. The final choice. Alex stood up slowly, his legs still weak from the pressure, his mind a whirlwind of thoughts. He didn't understand everything yet, but he felt something stirring within him, a force he had never known before. What is the truth? He asked, his voice hoarse, his body trembling. What do you want me to do? The entity's voice softened, its presence becoming almost comforting. You must face the final trial, Alex Daniels. The choice is yours. A shimmering portal appeared before him, glowing with a soft blue light. The edges of the portal seemed to shimmer with the same energy that surrounded the entity. Step through, it said, and you will learn the truth. But beware, the truth is not always what you want to hear. Alex hesitated. What would he find on the other side? The truth had always been elusive, and now, it seemed to lie just beyond his reach. He took a deep breath, gathering all his courage. He had come this far. There was no turning back now. He stepped through the portal. Alex felt the familiar tug of weightlessness as he was pulled through the portal. The world around him dissolved into nothingness, leaving behind the sounds of his heartbeat and the cold whisper of the wind that seemed to be everywhere and nowhere. He struggled to keep his thoughts focused, but it was difficult. The air around him was thick, heavy with something he couldn't quite understand. He felt as if he was being torn apart, stretched between two worlds. Then, just as suddenly as it had started, everything stopped. Alex gasped as he landed with a thud on solid ground, the impact forcing the air from his lungs. He scrambled to his feet, disoriented, his heart racing. He looked around. He wasn't sure what he expected, but what he saw wasn't it. He stood at the edge of a vast, glowing ocean. The water shimmered with hues of blue, green, and violet, its surface like liquid glass, smooth and still. Beyond the ocean, the land stretched out, covered in strange, luminescent plants and towering spires that seemed to reach into the sky. The air was thick with the scent of unknown flowers, and the sky above was a swirling mix of colors, not quite like any sky he had ever seen before. But what struck Alex the most wasn't the beauty of the place, it was the overwhelming sense of familiarity that washed over him. He took a step forward, the ground beneath him solid but soft, as though the earth itself was alive. His feet sank into it slightly with each step, and the sensation made him shudder. The land seemed to pulse with an energy he couldn't explain. His body hummed in response, every nerve alight with a feeling of connection, as if he were part of something larger. But there was no time to marvel at the surroundings. A voice, a deep, resonant voice, spoke from behind him, its tone like the rumble of thunder. "Welcome, Alex Daniels." Alex spun around, his breath catching in his throat as he saw the figure standing behind him. It was the same entity, the swirling mass of light and shadow, but now it appeared more solid, more real. The shifting darkness within its form had taken on a more defined shape, and the glowing light that surrounded it seemed to pulse with life. The being's voice echoed through the air, vibrating the ground beneath Alex's feet. "You've come far," the entity continued, its tone solemn. "But the final truth is not one you can escape. It is time to understand what lies beyond the surface of your existence." Alex felt a chill run down his spine. "What do you mean? What is all of this?" The entity's form shifted again, growing larger, more imposing. "You are standing at the crossroads of your species' future. You see, Alex Daniels, humanity is not just a product of your world. You were never meant to exist the way you do. Your true potential lies not in your survival, but in your awakening." Alex took a step back, his pulse quickening. "What are you talking about? I don't understand." "We're human. We've always been human." The entity's light pulsed with intensity. "You are not human, at least not in the way you think. The truth of your origins goes beyond what you've been told. You were created, not born. Your species was engineered, designed for a purpose that has yet to be fulfilled. And that purpose is to lead." Alex's mind spun. "Lead? Led what? Led who?" "The galaxy," the entity replied, its voice like a whisper carried on the wind. "The universe. You, Alex, are the key to unlocking your species' true destiny. But you are not the only one. There are others like you, scattered across the cosmos, waiting to awaken. But you are the first." Alex staggered, his mind racing. "You mean, we're not from Earth? We were created?" The entity's light flared, and a series of images flashed before Alex's eyes. He saw Earth, his Earth, the one he had always known. But then, he saw something else, something far older, far more alien. A different planet, one that was nothing like Earth. Its surface was covered in strange, crystalline structures, and massive ships hovered in the sky. The people were tall, their skin a shimmering silver, their eyes black as the void. And then Alex saw them, the humans. His people. They were there, but they weren't like the humans he knew. They were more advanced, more powerful, their bodies glowing with energy. They were not native to Earth, but were instead part of a long-forgotten plan to seed the galaxy with humanity's potential. Your species was not born of Earth, the entity explained. You were placed there, a species designed to evolve, to grow, to conquer. But the world you know is only a small fragment of the truth. You have been held back, confined to a single world, for far too long. Alex's heart raced as the weight of the entity's words sank in. So, we were created to spread across the galaxy? To conquer? To rule? Yes, the entity answered. But you have forgotten your true nature. Your people have lost the ability to tap into the potential that lies dormant within them. You were engineered to be leaders, to unite the galaxy. But instead, you have fought among yourselves, distracted by petty differences, blinded by your own limitations. Alex's mind was reeling, the shock of the revelation nearly too much to bear. But that doesn't make sense. We've always been told we're just ordinary people. Just like any other species. We've fought, we've struggled, but we've always survived. The entity's form shifted again, becoming more fluid, its voice both soothing and unsettling. Your survival is not the point, Alex. Your struggle is not the point. The point is the awakening. The realization of your true purpose. Your species was created with the potential to lead the galaxy, to bring order to chaos. But until now, that potential has remained dormant. Alex's mind raced, but there was one question he had to ask, the one question that had been haunting him since the beginning. Why me? Why was I chosen? Why not someone else? The entity's swirling form SE. The entity's swirling form seemed to ripple, as though it were considering the question. Because you are the first to awaken. You are the first to see the truth. You were chosen because your mind is open, because you are not afraid to challenge the world around you. You have the strength to carry this burden, to understand the responsibility that comes with this knowledge. Alex swallowed hard, his heart pounding in his chest. The weight of the responsibility was suffocating, but at the same time, there was something exhilarating about it. He wasn't just a human. He wasn't just a survivor. He was the key to something greater. To a destiny that had been waiting for him, for humanity, for the entire universe. The entity's voice grew softer, almost a whisper. But you must decide, Alex. The path ahead is not easy. The power you have within you can either save your species or destroy it. The choice is yours. The air around Alex crackled with energy as the entity's form began to fade, the light dimming until it was nothing but a glowing silhouette against the shimmering sky. The time for awakening is now. Do not waste it. And then, the entity was gone. The choice. Alex stood alone in the vast, alien landscape. The weight of the revelation hung over him like a dark cloud. His mind was a whirlwind of thoughts, of questions he could barely begin to comprehend. His whole life had been a lie, a carefully crafted illusion to keep him from seeing the truth. Humanity was not just another species on Earth, it was something much greater, something designed for a purpose far beyond what he had ever imagined. But with that knowledge came a heavy burden. The future of his people rested in his hands. Could he lead them to their true potential, to a future among the stars? Or would he let the weight of the past destroy everything? There was no turning back now. The truth had been revealed. And now, it was up to Alex to decide what came next. But deep within him, he knew one thing for certain, the journey was far from over. The galaxy awaited, and humanity's future was in his hands.